Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for Spirit, the stimulating program initiative for retirees that inspires thought. I'm Judy Steinig, Director of Community Programs for the Orthodox Union, and it's my honor to coordinate and host this program. Spirit was started several years ago as an on-site program, and now we're happy to present it as an online program for baby boomers, empty nesters, retirees, not yet retirees, sandwich generation parents, and seniors, everybody who is looking for educational, intellectual, and spiritual growth. Now, of course, since we continue still to shelter in because of the pandemic, Spirit has become the perfect way for everyone to engage in a virtual setting. Today, we are so happy to welcome back to the Spirit Forum, Mrs. Faye Wilbur, LCSW, Director of Community Relations of Mishkan of the Jewish Board. She's also a therapist in private practice in Brooklyn. Mrs. Wilbur has been with us several times, and we've always been so happy with her presentations. This is her third time she's been with Spirit, and the other two presentations you can already find in our archives. Today, she will be discussing a topic that is so important now during COVID and all the time in our lives, which is creating healthy and functional relationships. It is my honor to turn the Spirit Forum over to Faye Wilbur. Thank you, all of you, for joining us.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's nice to see some names of people I know. So good morning to those of you who I haven't seen in a long time. And thank you, Judy. It's really fun to do these presentations, and I love the emails that I get afterwards. So at the end, you'll be able to get the slides. You'll have my email address. Please don't be shy. So here we go. So when I did a workshop on Monday, they taught me how to make the slides bigger. I'm going to try and see if that works. If not, it's not working. Okay. I apologize. Okay, so this morning we're going to talk about healthy and rewarding relationships. Everything is about people. I never thought I would quote the commercial from the radio from 1-800-GOT-JUNK. But yesterday, when I was getting ready in the morning, their commercial said, so now the pandemic has taught us it's not about stuff, it's about people and about relationships. So if we're talking about it on commercials about getting rid of stuff, clearly relationships has been bumped up to an important place and recognized. We're going to start with our own relationships. We all have many different roles in our lives, and we have many different people in our lives if we are fortunate. So the different people we have in our lives can be our romantic partners, our relatives of every generation. We can have parents, we can have children, we can have grandchildren, aunts, uncles, cousins, you name it. We can have roommates. Some people have roommates, one or multiple. It can be by choice, so people are not home alone. It can be by necessity because it helps pay the bills. Whatever it is, sometimes roommates are friends. Sometimes roommates are people to share expenses with. Sometimes roommates are a pain in the neck. Friends are, I think of friends as the people we choose to be close to us. And there are all sorts of different definitions of what a friend is. And part of this presentation is going to talk about how do we not only make friends, but how do we have healthy, gratifying relationships? Because it's not about the number of people we have in our life, it's about the quality of the relationship. For those of us who are still at work, we have coworkers. Some coworkers are friends, some coworkers are just people we work with. And some of us are lucky enough to have had coworkers who we no longer work with who have been bumped up into the friends category. Caretakers is two different sides of the same word. So some people are caretakers of others, and some people have caretakers taking care of them, and some people fit into both categories. And when you think about being a caretaker, I'm not only talking about needing someone to take care of physical needs. A caretaker can be filling many different roles and many different parts of us that we need. So those are some of the relationships that I identify. Hold on, okay. I wanted to make sure my phone didn't make noise while we were talking together. Okay, so in the Tanakh, I love Bereshit for so many reasons. It starts with all these relationships that have struggles. So we have all these parenting struggles, like Adam and Chava. So the boys didn't get along so well. Cain and Hevel, that didn't necessarily turn out great. With the Avot and Imahot, so each one of those couples had different things they were struggling with, whether it was one child wasn't behaving properly, one child, we had a couple of instances where we have the favorite child, and how did that work out? We have a daughter who might have wandered a little too far, gotten herself in trouble, which then led to a couple of brothers misbehaving. So I'm pretty sure that all this is there to remind us that we're all human, relationships are really important, and there are bumps in the road. Then we have Moshe and his role as a father. He took really great care of Klal Yisrael, and Tzipporah did a lot of the parenting. I sometimes have this image of her saying, I have to always act like a single mother. You're always busy taking care of all of Klal Yisrael. I don't know if that's true, but that's how I hear it sometimes. And that was another relationship. And David Hamelach, he was so excited. He was dancing. And then Michal, his wife, was not pleased. She thought he was not respecting himself. He was not respecting the Malchut, and she chastised him. So those are different types of relationships and how they fall and how people manage with them. What does a healthy relationship include? Because it's not just a single variable. So empathy is not the same as sympathy. Sympathy is we feel sorry for someone. Empathy is we feel with someone. There's a wonderful little YouTube video about it's a bear and another animal. It's Brene Brown, and it's about depression. And please feel free to go look at it. It's wonderful. But in short, it's defining empathy. Instead of standing at the top of a pit and saying to the bear in the bottom of the pit, oh, you okay? Oh, you're not okay? I feel so bad. Empathy is you put a ladder into the pit and you climb into the pit. So that's an important thing. Compassion is feeling with and for someone else. Patience is one of those things that for many, many people is very hard. Waiting is not easy, but when we're in a good relationship, we're patient with the other person. We understand they don't do things the same way that we do them. We figure out we can wait. As they used to say in Israel, much more often, I think, than they do now, sablanut, just be patient. Respect. Many people struggle respecting others because they have a hard time respecting themselves. So we need to be in a place where we can identify our own strengths and our own weaknesses, and then we can give respect to others. If we struggle with that, it's much more difficult. Flexibility. If you're going to be rigid and it always has to be X and it always has to be Y, then it's everything in life is harder because life changes, we change, and we need to be open to those changes, which leads us to openness. There's so many opportunities out there if we want to take advantage of them. so many people that have so much to share with us if we let ourselves take it in. And this quote just seemed lovely: to use your voice for kindness, your ears for compassion, your hands for charity, your mind for truth, and your heart for love. So those of you who have been at some of my other presentations know I'm very visual. So you get all sorts of little tchotchkes on the side. So those were what we need for a healthy relationship. Unhealthy relationships have the opposite. They are replete with disrespect, dishonesty, people lying to each other, not being forthcoming. We know that there's dishonesty by omission and commission. So you can say something that's not honest, or you can just withhold information. Withholding information is likewise not honest. In unhealthy relationships, there is control, and all of this has to be a pattern. It's not a one-time thing. You know, if once in a while we are rude to someone, then if we're healthy people, we say, I'm sorry, I should not have said that, I should not have done that. But if this is a pattern of consistently being respectful to someone, consistently not being honest, controlling emotionally, financially, withholding money, telling someone they don't spend properly if you're in that kind of relationship, obviously physically controlling someone, whether it's pushing, shoving, restraining, forcing someone to do something they don't want to do with fear of physical consequences, and fostering dependence. So that can be tricky. We all like to be independent, or no, I take that back. Most people like to be independent, like to make their own choices, like to be able to figure out how to do things on their own. If that is taken away and someone else fosters dependence on them, you're taking away a piece of a person, and removing that is a painful process and is part of an unhealthy relationship. So intimidation and isolation. Threatening is intimidating someone, whether you threaten to do something or say something, or if you know something private about a person and you say, if you don't do this, I will just disclose that information. I will tell someone about what you've said or done, or isolating them. So now with the virus, many people are choosing to self-isolate, and many other people are being forced to isolate. But being forced to do something, again, is very, very different than choosing to do it. This is, if you don't have choices, you're in an unhealthy relationship. And lack of support and blaming someone. So if someone says, oh, I can't believe I made this mistake, I feel so stupid. So if you're in a healthy, nurturing relationship, the other person will say something like, we all make mistakes. We're all human. It's okay. The world won't end. Life happens. Don't get all bent out of shape about it, whatever they're going to say. I've done that too, which is really wonderful, because then you're letting them know that it's a pretty typical universal experience. If, on the other hand, somebody says, I can't believe how stupid I am, I made a mistake, and the person says, you're right, you are stupid. No one else would do that. It's just because you're a dodo. That is an unhealthy relationship. And we could spend, and I've done many workshops only on unhealthy and abusive relationships, but that's not what we're talking about here. I wanted to introduce it to make sure that people can see the difference between what's healthy and what's unhealthy. And unhealthy relationships don't necessarily start that way. Lots of them can gradually evolve into ill health. And it's something that when you start feeling uncomfortable, or you start feeling the relationship is going to a place you don't feel good about, it's important to pay attention. our intimate relationships. So those are the ones that are close to our heart. Those are the ones, if we're lucky, we all have friends who we can call up and say, so what happened? And you haven't spoken to them in 6 months, and you pick up where you left off, and it just feels wonderful. And those are those long-term relationships. So intimate relationships are always emotional, and sometimes they're physical. And by physical, I mean, sometimes you get to sit in the same room as people. Sometimes you get to touch them. I remember my Oma, Aleha Shalom, had a cousin who was one of her best friends. And whenever they would sit together, they would sit there and stroke each other's arms. And it was so poignant because they just had to touch each other. It just felt so much better to them. So sometimes it's emotional and physical, and sometimes it's just physical. I put the baggage because we're all people and we all bring stuff. And I had this wonderful social work professor when I was in social work school. And she used to say one of the diagnoses that needs to be put in the DSM, which is what we all use to make diagnoses, is chronic undifferentiated mishigas. Because we all have narishkeit. And it can be logical. Usually mishigas is illogical. But we need to recognize what we have and be okay with what other people have. Another part of intimate relationships is asking for advice, listening to people. Hashem told Abraham, take counsel from your partner. Listen to her. She has something to say. When you protect your personal space and let the other person in. So boundaries is something that is so important. Boundaries is respecting that other people can say no. They don't have to say everything. They don't have to share everything. They absolutely don't have to tell you everything. But if we don't let people in, then we're depriving ourselves of close relationships. So if we have a good relationship and there's something we don't want to share, that's okay. But if we never share anything and never let anybody in, it's just, we're not getting anywhere. We're not letting them nurture us, and we're keeping that distance so that they'll feel it and they'll be less likely to help us and will let us help them. I remember Rabbi Dr. Abraham Tversky at a conference once was talking about relationships. And he said there was someone who was upset with him. And he said, I don't know why they're upset with me. I never even did them a favor. So I remember that because sometimes if we do a favor for someone, they feel uncomfortable. They might feel beholden. They might feel now the relationship isn't equitable. We've given them something. They haven't given something back to us. So I think that's the other reason that we learn about tzedakah needing to be something that if it's done privately, it's better than if the other person knows we're giving tzedakah, because that can change the relationship. So those are kinds of things to think about. So my favorite Haftorah is Erev Rosh Chodesh, when we read about David and Yonatan. And they're just such good friends. They will do anything for each other. And, you know, at the end, when they're just hugging and crying, it's just, that's what friendship is about. You'll do whatever needs to be done for somebody, no matter how hard it is. And then we bring out the best in each other. So sometimes we might be doing or want to do things that are not so great. So Yehuda was not necessarily doing something so wonderful, but Tamar set it up that she was helping him do the right thing. And as friends, that's something else we do. We try to help each other do the right thing. If we see one of our friends, you know, going to a place that might not be good for them, saying something that might be damaging, we might say, have you thought about it? Do you really think that's good for you? I'm not sure I would do it that way. Again, we're not telling the other person what to do. We're just making observations, commenting, and being there. So everyone in spirit has adult relationships. Some of us are blessed to have children. So if you're in the category where you're blessed to have children, you might have opinions about your children and about the choices of friends they make, their spouse, how they're raising their children. And you can have opinions and you can think about it. And then you should decide how and if you want to share that relationship and how and if you want to comment on it. When you're asked, it's one thing. When you volunteer, it's another thing. And it's also different if you are worried. If you, going back to that slide, we talked about unhealthy relationships. So friends can be controlling, spouses can be controlling, children can be controlling. One of my clients will talk about how her sons started to behave towards her the way their father does. So now her sons are yelling and screaming at her. And that's not okay. You know, it's just not right. But she's in a relationship with an unhealthy man who's mistreating her for many years. And that's what her children are seeing. So when you look at relationships, there are things you might not like versus things that are dangerous. And as adults, we need to figure out which is it and how can we handle it in a good way? Because our opinions are just opinions, sometimes welcome, sometimes not. If we are blessed to have older relatives, how have things changed? Now with the coronavirus, there is so much isolation, and research has been showing that with isolation, there's also cognitive decline. Not everybody is Zooming, not everybody is listening to or watching lectures, is not keeping their mind busy. So there can be cognitive decline from that. There can also be elder abuse, where maybe they're being taken advantage of. They're being particularly vulnerable. I used to run a caregivers group. So the group was for adult children. They would all be in the spirit age category, 50 and older, who had parents that they were not necessarily physically responsible for, and some of them weren't even local, but that they had caretaking responsibility for them. They might have been in charge of their money. They might have had to make sure that the caretakers were doing their job. They would maybe take them to doctor's appointments, maybe be the ones talking to doctors. And there was a woman whose widowed father had been befriended by a lady in the neighborhood when it was pre-COVID. And the woman was a young woman, and she started coming over, and he would feed her. And this man had a home health aide who called the daughter one day and said, you know, this lady who keeps coming over for meals has now gone into the bank with your father and forbidden me to go in with them. So this woman was very concerned that this new friend of her father's was going to steal his money because he was not cognitively at a place where he could make decisions. So she immediately called the bank and told them not to let him make any withdrawals, and then spoke to an attorney on how to figure it out. That was a much less complicated kind of taking advantage of the vulnerable than if it's within the family, because it can be a child, it can be a niece, it can be a nephew, it can be a grandchild. And elder abuse is even more underreported or less reported than is domestic violence. Because if it's somebody who you love, who's supposed to love you, who is saying, I'm not going to give you your medicine if you don't give me money, and that person, and you raised that person, then that's really very embarrassing. So when you are in touch with your older relatives, always look if things are different. How are they functioning? Sometimes it can be a tiny little nuance. And when we were seeing people physically, then we could look at the full body language and see how are they standing? Are they looking a little cautious? Are their eyes darting? Do they look uncomfortable? So now you have to do that on Zoom, and you can only see them sort of from the mid-chest up to try to get a sense of how are they doing? Are they alone? Are they feeling safe? And it's important to help people who are isolated make phone calls. Someone was just telling me she used to sit with her mother and send out Rosh Hashanah cards because it was one of those things her mother loved to get cards. So if they sent cards, people would reciprocate. So thinking of ways to be creative with the older relatives to make sure that the isolation decreases, the vulnerability decreases, and all of those things are going on for them. So I'm going to repeat how to have healthy relationships many different ways to make sure we get it. And I just love the phone booth from Britain, so that's why it's there. Remember phone booths? So some of the tools to achieve a healthy relationship is to be respectful, trust the other person, and trust yourself. So I said this before, but if you're not trusting, if you're not comfortable in a relationship and it feels funny and there's something in you that just says, I'm not sure this is okay, trust yourself. Communicate means saying what's comfortable, saying what's not comfortable. Some people are so much easier giving and have a much harder time taking, but it's okay. It's important to ask for help. If you need help, ask for it. None of us should be islands. We should all be able to say, this would make me happy. I can't do this by myself. When you go do an errand, would you mind picking up for me? Rather than waiting for someone to call up and say, do you need anything? I'm going to a store. That's like a very simple, basic kind of example, but it's one of those things that's important. Because some people are going to think to call you and some people are just not. Excuse me a second. Sorry. Compromising. So, yeah, things aren't going to go your way. Everybody here has lived long enough to know that compromise is really important. And in compromise, we don't necessarily get exactly what we want. Sometimes we get something close to what we want. Sometimes we get something less close to what we want. I was talking to someone yesterday, one of my clients was saying he wants his marriage to be exactly like it was the first 2 years of marriage. They are now married 26 years, have 4 children, and 4 challenging children for different reasons. And his wife said, I'm not that same person I was when we got married. I don't want to go there. I want our marriage to be different. I'm a different person. And he said, no, I can't. That's not an option for me. It's either going to be the same as the first 2 years or I can't live with it. So my question was, so if she can't go there, what do you want to do? Would you rather be divorced and they love each other and they care about each other, but he can't figure out how to compromise because of his own personal history. So that's something that we're trying to figure out, because if he's not going to compromise, then he's going to have huge loss in his life, a really big void. We have to commit to a relationship. So commitment means you have to put in energy. You have to do work. You have to think of other people. It's not like, you plant a seed and you have to water it and you have to make sure it gets enough sun. Some of us name our plants and talk to them. You don't have to do that, But you have to commit. You have to know that this is about what you're putting in and taking care of it. Being open, again, being open and flexible is like so essential. Now, feel safe to be vulnerable. Most people don't like to be vulnerable. It's just not a comfortable place to let all of our warts out there. Let people see what we're terrible at. Let people see what hurts our feelings, because if they know what hurts our feelings, then the risk is they can hurt us. But the upside is, if we make ourselves vulnerable, then they will help take care of us. They will be able to shore us up and give us something extra. I forgot to write down you have to have fun, but we have to have fun. We used to have clinical staff meetings, and people would present a family in the clinic. And my question was always, so how does this family have fun? We need to have fun, even in these times. We have to figure that out. Tools to achieving these healthy relationships. So working at it. Talking is so much less important than listening. And not only with your ears, I put the picture of the ear, but we have to listen with our hearts. What is said verbally and what is not said, what is omitted, is really important. Don't assume you know what the person meant. So if they say something, you can say, what do you mean? Or could you clarify that? I'm not sure I'm getting it. Because if we make assumptions about what a person is saying, we can be way off base, completely off base. A colleague says one of her most important things in telling people is, if I get it wrong, you better correct me, because I can't be helpful if I'm going up the highway and you are on the little backcountry road. We need to be on the same road together. So asking for clarification is essential. I statements. So you hurt my feelings is not the same as I was hurt when you said, or I was hurt when you did. Because in the you hurt me, what we're doing is we're blaming the other person, and we're giving the other person the responsibility for our emotions. We need to keep responsibility for our emotions. And what hurts my feelings might not hurt your feelings. And often our feelings are hurt more because of who we are and how we grew up and how we relate to people, rather than what the other person said or did. So I might say something to someone and they'll be fine with it. And I might say the same thing to another person and it will hurt them to the core. So if we acknowledge and speak about our own feelings, then we're owning it. So being realistic. No one person is going to meet all of your needs. That's just not going to happen. Be realistic about what another person can give you, what they might want to give you, what they might not want to give you. It's their choice. Just because you want something doesn't mean the other person has to give it to you or wants to give it to you. So being realistic of what you expect of others is important. And then that goes along with being honest with yourself. So am I asking for this because I'm testing them? Am I asking for this because I really need it? Do I really need it? Understanding ourselves makes us much better in the relationships we have with others. And taking responsibility. So I'm sorry, I made a mistake. That was dumb of me. What was I thinking? Those are like great phrases, because we're saying we did it and we're owning it. When we go back to the unhealthy relationships, that doesn't happen. In an unhealthy relationship, the other person is getting blamed. You made me angry. If you would not have made chicken, then I wouldn't be so bent out of shape. If you would have folded the laundry by 11:37 this morning, then I would be fine. No, probably not. Then you would have found something else to fetch about. But we need to take responsibility for our own behaviors in order to have healthy relationships. So one of the things I love about doing presentations is I always learn something new. So I had never heard of frientimacy before I did a presentation a few weeks ago. So there's a woman, Shasta Nelson. She's a friendship expert. She's apparently also a singer, which I had never heard of her. And she has this incredibly simple formula on how to have good friendships. And she talks in one of her, I think it was her TED Talk, which are really cool if you don't know about them. In one of her TED Talks about how she was with her friends and they were going around and everybody was talking. And then one person said something and then it went on some weird tangent and it went someplace completely different. And they never got to her turn to talk about her week, her day. And she talks about feeling so alone, even though she was with these people who were her friends. So as we said at the beginning, friendship is not about the quantity of people in your life. It's about the quality of people. And she talks about the need to be seen in a safe and satisfying way. So she has 3 criteria, what she defines as avoiding modern day loneliness. So positivity. Again, positivity isn't all about, oh, this is great, everything's wonderful. Yes, we like great, we like wonderful. I in no way want to minimize that, but we want empathy. We want, that sounds great, that sounds a little hard. We want that range of feelings without always being a downer. Nobody wants to talk to someone who's negative and never positive. Because if they're never positive, then it rubs off. You know that old saying, show me your friends, I'll show you who you are. So if you hang out with people who are always downers, you're going to feel down. Consistency. So you need to be there. You need to, like, building history. And it doesn't mean you have to be friends since 5th grade. That's a luxury and a privilege. But building history, I have seen many relationships deepen much more quickly during this pandemic than prior to it. Maybe it's because people have more time, or maybe it's because they're investing, but building that commonality and having people who are there with you, spending time together. Again, it doesn't have to be in person. It can be on the phone, it can be on a Zoom. Increasing interaction, so call more often, send a text. Lots of people have been complaining about texts and emails and the generational difference, where somebody might send a long text and they get back a smiley face emoji. And okay, it might be unsatisfying, but you weren't ignored and you got something back. And that builds consistency. And it goes back to being realistic and being vulnerable. You know, letting your warts show and letting other people know, maybe you have a dream that you will never be able to fulfill. That's okay. You can modify your dream. You can create new dreams. Judy and I were talking about coping skills and what do we all do with the pandemic and how are we coping? So I have taken up coloring and decorating the space behind me so that when I do these Zoom meetings, at least during the Zoom meetings that I'm just on a meeting, I can color. And then I decorate behind me so it looks less institutional. So figuring out how we can cope better and telling our friends what we're doing and asking them to tell us what they're doing so that we can add it to our toolkit. So Shasta Nelson's triangle, it's interesting because she says the positive interactions should outweigh negative interactions 5-1. And I remember decades ago when I was a new mother, learning in a parenting workshop that yes, you need to compliment your kids 5 times for every one negative that you say. And that's what friendships are about too. We have to build on the gratitude. We have to build on the positivity. We have to take care of each other. So if you see somebody who you think is in an unhealthy relationship, let them know you're there. You can tell them, you know, I'm worried. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm concerned about. Don't say, I'm right. This is what I'm seeing. But let them know you're there. And if you're not sure, contact someone and say, am I way off base? Am I really accurate? This little bear saying, if you need me, I'm here. If you don't, I'm still here. That is like such an important message. I remember when I would have people say to me, you know, I carried around the phone number for years and I didn't need it. And then I was able to call this person because I still had them and I knew they would be available. So that's what we all need to do. We need to be available and still be there for folks and know that they are there for us. So we are blessed because as Jews, we have HaKadosh Baruch Hu with us. And he's there for us. And so going back to Rabbi Dr. Abraham Torsky, who said, I don't even know how many books he has now, but when I heard him, he said, I wrote 36 of the same book and they're all about self-esteem. So we are all created, B'Tselem Elokim. That's who we are. That's what's going on with us. And if we see ourselves that way, then we can also take advantage of the relationship. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there for us, whether we're happy or not so happy, whether we're being angry with him or grateful to him, he's there for us. And we have all of those resources that are there for us. So though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. So like, how cool is that? If we are with others, there's safety in numbers, there's power in numbers. Being kind is a muscle. Being a good friend is something we always need to work on, something we need to be aware of, something we need to cherish and take care of. So I think music is really important. And I just picked, there were so many songs about how we can be good friends, how we can understand friendship. I gave you a potpourri of choices. So a couple of them are Kol Isha. I leave it to you to choose what you want to listen to or not, or what you want to sing or not. And you can sing with a friend, or you can sing by yourself. Resources. So I never like to end any kind of presentation without giving people an opportunity to know where they can go afterwards. So none of us need to manage this alone. We can all go to people who can help us. And so sacred spaces is, that would be for institutions. If you want your shul to be a safer place, that is on that level. If you think you need a therapist, anywhere in America, almost, there are Jewish family services. That's what a JFS is, a Jewish family service. They are organizations that generally have mental health and concrete services. They can help connect you to a daycare center, a home health agency. They can help you get food. They can help you access whatever the state you live in has, or the city you live in has, and that's an important resource. Here in New York City, the Jewish Board is one of the largest agencies in the state. We have outpatient services. I work at Mishkan, where we have both community and day hab, as well as we have over 130 people at any given time living with us with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We connect people to resources. Relief Resources is an international referral agency for mental health services. They usually refer to private practitioners, not always. If it's a family violence issue, Met Council and Shalom Task Force, also they're there and they can be a huge resource for people. So in Brooklyn, we are starting some new groups on having healthy relationships. So I included that. I love now when people say to me, so are the groups going to be in person? And my new answer is, well, it depends what color the neighborhood is. You know, if we're yellow, we can be in person. If we're red, we have to be online and Zooming. But who knows? So those are some of the groups that are going to be starting. And here's my contact information. As I said at the beginning, I love it when people send me emails, or emails are easier than a phone call, but I am going to get back to you if you call me. And that way I can, you know, start a new relationship and hopefully be helpful to people. So I want to thank you. It's Thursday, so I can wish everybody a good Shabbos. I have one client who I had mentioned to her once that it's so cute because, like, starting on Wednesday, my clients will wish me a good Shabbos. So now if we have a phone session on a Monday, she says to me, so I'm going to be the first. I can wish you a good Shabbos, and it's Monday. Somehow on Thursday feels more appropriate. So Judy, thank you again for inviting me to be part of this wonderful group. It's always fun, and it's always my pleasure to be here. And I'm going to stop sharing now so you can all see each other. Right, Judy? Judy, you there? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Faye, thank you so much for yet another wonderful presentation. I think they're just getting better and better. Of course, we're going to ask you back again, but it'll give you a little bit of a break. So we want to just thank Faye. As I said, her other two presentations are already in the archive, so you can search for them there. In fact, we now have a search on the archive. So if you search by Faye Wilbur, you will find them. We're very proud of all the work that we're doing to get our archives up and running. And today's presentation with the PowerPoint will be sent out to you. Hopefully it'll be later today or early tomorrow morning. So any of the slides that you want to check back on, and of course, all of the contact info that Faye was mentioning will be right there in the attachment that you'll get in today's email. Next week, since Thursday is Thanksgiving, we will not be holding Spirit. We will just be having it on Tuesday. And we will be hearing from Marla Kurtz on self-care for the caregiver. So I just also want to remind you that any of your Spirit links that I sent you that were before November 1st, if you're frustrated that they're not working, you're correct, they're not working. But all of those presentations are in the archives. We changed our Zoom account, so those don't work. The ones from November 1st on are all working. And of course, within a couple of weeks, all of those will hopefully also be in the archives. So you can enjoy any of the past programs that you want at your own convenience. Everyone have a wonderful day. Have a good Shabbos, be safe and healthy. And we look forward to seeing you back again next week. Take care.